Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends this week. Please, if you get a chance, go back at our video from last week. We got the audio problems. We apologize. The audio problems are all fixed, so everything's clear as a bell, and it was a pretty good video. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I think everybody that finally got in there a second time to check on it. It took a while. It was just basically on the transfer. The video was good. But go back, check that. Go down, leave a comment, hit subscribe, notification bell, because that will let you know when we update. And we did that with that video when we corrected the problem. We set the notifications out. Go over the About section where it says About, and in there you'll find a link to represent.com. Pick up a shirt, black or gray, long sleeve, short sleeve, Dutch Hunter Rendezvous, and Legend of the Superstition Mountains. Not to mention the 5th, 6th, 7th of November, we will be out at the Don's Camp. I know we definitely have confirmed Robert Kesselring speaking. A number of the individuals from the Lust for Gold situation will be there, so it'll be very cool to catch up with everybody. So meet us there. That'll be Saturday night out there, but you're more than welcome to come out. There are restrooms. There's no water. Bring some extra firewood. We will not be serving the chili this year because we're going to still kind of, with the COVID thing, kind of be cool about it and all. So bring your own food and all, share if you can. You know, help a neighbor out if you want. We will see what we can do Saturday. I'm looking at the weather, but it looks like we can have a nice hike maybe, or do something kind of fun on Saturday morning. But we're going to wait and kind of see how our weather's clearing that day. But let's get to it today. Today's topic is, we're going to talk about Adolph Ruth, because, you know, round and round and round it goes. Most popular subject there is, right? Now, I did the discussion on Adolph Ruth and how basically Adolph Ruth is... You know, his dad, the medical examiner, said it was of natural causes. All the physical evidence upon the body in the medical examiner's reports. If there was any type of murder investigation ever with any of that, there would have had to been, the medical examiner coroner would have had to say it was justified. It was possibly homicide. And that is the reason there is no files. There was none of that. I've actually talked to a number of people who worked with Maricopa Sheriff's Department and Pinal County Sheriff's Department. They have files and clippings about some of the stuff down there, but they do not have an investigation file or any of that, and it was not thrown out after X amount of years, because Frank and Jack Sanfelice and others will tell you they do not throw out unsolved homicide cases. So beyond all that, and we kind of that, this week I want to talk about something that bugged me for years. Now, at a certain point, my buddy Randy Wright, because I like to throw Randy in here, but him and Greg Davis, and I can't remember who else, might have been Kevin Noonemaker, but anyways, they went on a hike. They wanted to go down to where Adolph Ruth's camp had been in West Boulder Canyon. So they went down, and Randy did a really nice article talking about it. And I thought if we had a website, I would put that article up with his permission, because it was a really well-written article on that, and it was really nice. But talking about the trip and kind of I think it was actually called something like In Ruth's Footsteps, or In Adolph Ruth's Footsteps. And he did that and put it on the forums, I think. So if you go to the Lost Dutchman forum, from the one that started around 2000 or so, you might find it in there in the archives. But Randy did a great job with that. When he came out, I asked him, because I was always puzzled by one thing. How the heck did Adolph Ruth get to Blacktop from there? And that's always particularly something that bothers me, because he left with basically a thermos of water. And the medical examiner's report is he died of natural causes, probably heat exhaustion, heat stroke, dehydration, all those things. Remember, he's an elderly man with a plate in his hip and all his health issues that he had. Not a big, robust, hardy guy. So somehow he made it from there. Now, if you look at a map, and all you people probably do Google Maps and Google Earth and stuff, and you look at West Boulder Canyon and that spot, which is pretty well known, you get deep down in there in West Boulder Canyon, it makes no sense. Now, in Sim Zeeley's book, Tex Barkley talks about how Ruth came to him and he told him, well, the best place to go is you got to go up in here in Willow Canyon, which is Peralta Canyon today. Remember that. The name's changed over the years, but Willow Canyon, which is about a mile from his ranch. And you would go up Willow Canyon, and then you would intersect and go into West Boulder. And so you would go through Boulder Basin and start heading west, and then go to Boulder Canyon, West Boulder Canyon, and then you would start going south through there, and that's where he camped. So literally he was making a big horseshoe to where he was camped. And that's supposedly where all this stuff lies. And they did aerial photography in the area. Nothing that can show you the specific areas. It's just hillsides and stuff. But they did drawings and little things and talked about his camp. But it always bugged me again because I had been out there and I kept thinking, if I had one canteen of water in a camp and then I had to go all the way to Blacktop and back, that's especially in the summertime with the summer heat, over 100 degrees during the day, that's a hell of a trip to go up there all the way to Blacktop. And then once you get to Blacktop, which is a hike and a half, then you got to go up Blacktop and get to where he was over there and overlook down and looking down in Needle Canyon. So it always puzzled me. And I asked Randy, my question was obviously, well, what'd you think of all that? And I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but Randy was curious too. He's like, yeah, I don't know how the hell the guy could do that. He had to come all the way out of there, go up, over all this. It's not like it's an easy trail. And he talks about the ride in, and he said that fit the narrative, but he said for him to go all the way out there, and Randy was like, that's just puzzling because you would be exhausted by the time you got to Blacktop. And then by the time you got to Blacktop, now you still got to go up, and then you got to go up to cross Blacktop and all that. So it's like, could have even gotten that far. So then that became the thing where people said, well, he was murdered. So the guys took him up there and held him by gunpoint and were threatening him and wanted him to tell them where he was and all this and shot him, and which we know is to some degree bunk. But that was a story that I think was built up because it had to explain why Adolph Ruth's on Blacktop, right? Even though you have your other conspiracy theorists that say they took him to Peters Mesa, killed him on Peters Mesa, and then brought him over to Blacktop, right? Which didn't make much more sense than it was before, because if you read the reports and you read the newspaper stories and everything else and you see the photographs of his body and you understand how spread out, he did die on Blacktop. And let's say we're about we have to be 98%. Nothing's ever perfectly certain, but I don't believe he died on Peters Mesa. Anyone that said that had their leg pulled at that point in time, and which is what I believe. I think some people did some leg pulling, because I think one of the people that said that he died on Peters Mesa, supposedly off the record, was Gus Barkley. He was known for pulling people's legs and telling some tall stories, but what even better yet is he found them there, so he would have known where they really found them, and I don't think he moved the body. So yeah, he's on Blacktop, and if you look at that area, going through the Boulder Basin, Brush Corral Basin, and all that, and over by Caballo's camp, and down Palomino and across there, you're basically where? You're by East Boulder Canyon, correct? That's right there next to you. So you have Boulder, which confluence comes in, and then it hits East Boulder, splits into West Boulder, and then that all ends up down in Needle Canyon, comes up around that. If you go up over and go across down Bull Pass. So I'm looking at it all, and I know White Rock Springs there, and I'm not thinking he went to Charlie Boy, but I was looking at some springs in the area, and I knew Boulder Canyon always has water. I mean, most of the year there's some water in Boulder Canyon. So I'm looking at all this, and of course recently we were looking at, we were doing some, for some film work, transferring some old 8mm film, and it was from the 60s, early 60s, of Chuck Ayler's camp. After Caballo's camp in East Boulder, it was the Boulder Canyon camp up north, or up in that area, and we were looking at that, and all the water that was in the creek. It was probably rainy season because it was flowing like a flood through there, but he's there. But one of the reasons he put it there was because of water source. So I'm realizing in the 60s, Chuck's putting that in place because there's a water source there in Boulder Canyon, and I knew of a couple other areas, so I kept looking at it and thinking about it and going, so there is water in there. Would it have been seasonal or different in Gus Barkley's time? And it could have, but I thought White Rock Springs was probably still running, Bluff Springs probably still was, and Charlie Boy probably still had water. So it seems even more odd that he would have put Ruth all the way over into West Boulder, unless he was just trying to keep him hidden away and just put him where he couldn't be, get access to any place he wanted to go. Put him out there, let him be there. Anyways, we know there was 2 other guys that took him out there in the meantime, and then Barkley went out to check on him. Barkley's story. Didn't find him, looked around for him, and then reported him missing. The same token, one of the other guys said they went in the camp, found him missing, and they went. And that's kind of where the story lies. And we got always that puzzling thing that in books it might say different things, and sometimes the manuscript might say the wrong thing. But we'd always had those arguments around the campfire. And I always was interested, my ears would prick up when everybody started talking about Ruth's death. And I didn't want to hear the Peters Mesa stuff, I didn't want to hear the conspiracy theories. I wanted to hear just the common sense of, would the law enforcement, not knowing what happened to him and that he's missing the mountains, give specific information, or did they give specific information and the newspaper get it incorrect? And I realized that little bit of a U kind of turn weird, kind of looks like the infinity sign, or not the infinity sign, the pi sign or whatever, that's in West Boulder Canyon actually is in Boulder Canyon as well. So I was like, the areas are very, very similar. Could it be they had the wrong area? And then I started looking at all this information and trying to think, well, is there anything that justifies that? So the next thing I looked at is, okay, I figure there could be water in there. There's a possibility. And the areas match up, the topography, everything. It's obviously a lot closer. If you're in East Boulder, you're right there. If you're in West Boulder or East or normal Boulder Canyon, you're a lot closer. West Boulder's the furthest. So of all the 3, East Boulder's the easiest. I don't know of a water source back in there or a spring in there, that immediate area. But in Boulder Canyon, there could be a water source, and it could be confused with West Boulder. And we don't have an exact thing or anything, but I thought that actually makes a lot of sense to me. So I was sitting there, and that was where kind of my head wrapped around, but how do you prove that? Because at that point, we're talking, it's almost 80 years. So 80 years later, where do you get any type of material? I could walk those canyons, and I could say, well, this possible, but I can't put myself in 1930, 31 in that specific spot. So I kept thinking there's nothing I have that actually can tie into this. I know it's a conundrum of sorts, how this elderly crippled man managed to do this, but then other people would tell me, well, some guys can be almost superhuman when they're excited, they're back in the mountains, and I'm thinking, but it's 100, 105 degrees, it's summertime, he just has a thermos. I just don't get it. There's no shade anywhere on that trail. It's not, you get down around Caballo's camp down in East Boulder there between Palomino and Blacktop, there's some shade trees and stuff down in there, but other than that on that trip, there's not a lot of shade. So I'm thinking, man, I'm not stupid enough to take 1 canteen of water, start from where his camp supposedly is, try to get all the way up to Blacktop, because I'm going to be gassed and pretty much cooked for the day. That's a hell of a hike to go out there and then expect to come back, even for myself. So why did Adolph Ruth think that was such a great idea? And I'm thinking, I don't know if he would have done that, but how do I prove that? So I'm sitting there one night, and we were at the rendezvous, actually, and I'm sitting around, and we're talking, and Tom Collenborn was talking. And some people were asking him questions, and Tom was talking, and he was enjoying himself. And Tom was talking about Adolph Ruth, and he referenced to some people and some stuff, and someone who'd had a possible sighting of Adolph Ruth, and he said the word East Boulder Canyon. And Joe Roboto, bless you, Joe, stopped Tom and said, Tom, you're wrong there. Remember, it's West Boulder Canyon. And Tom paused, and Tom gave him that look. It's the one that Frank gives me. It's that look like, STFU. And he kind of gave him that look that Tom would, because you interrupted me. And then Tom just didn't change it, just kept going with the conversation and all that. And I thought it was funny. And afterwards, I asked someone said, well, Tom just had a slip of the tongue. And I said, yeah, but it was odd that he said definitively East Boulder Canyon. It wasn't, West Boulder Canyon. I mean, Tom didn't make mistakes like that, trust me. And there are going to be people argue, oh no, Tom, no, he didn't make mistakes like that. And he sometimes, when you would talk to him, he would give you funny looks and say something, and then you'd look at him funny, and then he'd give you that look. And Frank gives me that look too. That's why those guys were buddies, because Frank gives me that look of like, we'll talk about it later, and then I just shut up and just sit back in the chair and light another cigarette, right? So I kind of felt like something was up, but I didn't know what to say. And I didn't feel it was my place or anything to say, hey, you know, when you brought up East Boulder. So I kind of waited, and I had to wait until the next year before I could get a chance to kind of address it. So it was like the next year, and this thing bugged me and ate at me, but I wanted to make sure I put it and kind of sorted it out in my head. And we were sitting there, and I remember everybody went off to do something, was talking about something, everybody's kind of distracted and all, and I came over and sat next to Tom, and we just talked for a couple minutes and chit-chat. And I said, last year when you were talking, you mentioned about the thing about Adolph Ruth. And I gave him a look and said, you know, the whole thing used to, you know, East Boulder Canyon. And I said, I've always thought that he could have been in Boulder or East Boulder. That's probably more likely where he would have been camped. And Tom gave me that kind of look, and he didn't say nothing. And he kind of like didn't nod, no reaction whatsoever. And then Greg Davis came walking up with his handy dandy tape recorder, and Tom had just been turning to me, and he was looking, and I could tell he had that faraway look. So I said, Tom's going to say something and address why he meant what he said, because I had a feeling Tom meant to say East Boulder in context of what he was saying. And Greg walked up, set down his tape recorder, pushed the buttons, and Tom never said another word. Greg doesn't understand sometimes. Yeah, a lot of guys are savvy to that, and they just see him coming and they just shut down. And that was the end of that. And I was like, man, I'm never going to get that story. And I just decided to let it go. I thought, I have a problem with it, East Boulder, Boulder Canyon, compared to West Boulder Canyon, but I'm never going to know the difference. And I just decided to let it go, because I also learned Tom had a little bit of an issue with people thinking Adolph Ruth's murdered and this and that. He knew I felt different, but he hated talking about it because it was that thing that people always wanted to talk about round and around. And I kind of wanted it for more my own curiosity than anything other, because I remember Adolph Ruth wasn't looking for the Lost Dutchman Mine. He was looking for a Lost Peralta mine that was by way of the Gonzalez family, kind of that deal. So I understand why we confuse the two, because Walt supposedly had a Peralta mine, but I always see Adolph Ruth sometimes almost as a separate, singular issue in the whole matter. And its story kind of overshadows a lot of other stuff. A lot of things with the Adolph Ruth story muddies up the rest of it. So I finally decided I just wanted to let it be. Paul Shimmick was doing some great research back then, and a lot of guys came up with a lot of stuff. The Sims Ely letters, or no, it wasn't the Sims Ely. Yeah, it was the Sims Ely letters with Erwin Ruth, a number of people, and I thought it was great stuff. So I just kind of let that stuff slide, looked for other things to keep me busy during the summer, and just kind of dismissed that. And then at a certain point, I'm with a certain individual, and I will not say their name, and I still feel like I'm in a point of non-disclosure concerning things. And I will give you one name in here, you will hear. But I was with this individual, and we were talking, and we went through some material that's not open for the public, because for personal reasons on a third party's part, or fourth party, or whatever, because there's two of us there, and that other person had someone else's stuff. So anyways, it was a journal, and the journal was actually based on another journal, and I'd heard about the other journal and discussed the other journal with the person that owned both journals. And they were from two different individuals, or diaries, whatever you want to call them. The first one I heard about was the person's actual meeting and running into and seeing Adolph Ruth in East Boulder Canyon. It brought me back to that same old question, but I didn't know how to broach it to anybody, because it was just something someone talked about, and I wanted to see that journal. And that person said, if I do locate it, it's in my archives, if I locate it again, I will get it and break it out, and you can make some copies of those sections. It's not very interesting except for that. Well, this journal talked about that individual who wrote the other journal about his meeting and running across Adolph Ruth, and excuse me, and how that individual and that group decided to pull out of their search for the next year, because they felt it could pull them into, who knew what happened to Adolph Ruth, things could be possibly suspicious if one of them had run into him. So it became kind of a weird tangled web, and I remember reading that and saying, this actually substantiates the other journal. And I kind of vaguely know maybe where both journals are still today. And if I ever got a chance and was able and given the permission to print that stuff, it's very interesting because it puts in context very real individuals who were in the mountains at that time. And it's actually dated, so you have dates to coordinate with that. And so I found all that really super interesting, but what can you do with it? Because I don't have the actual pages of the journal. But I did see the one journal, and I saw the pages referencing the one other journal. Now I know Ray and I think it's Lizzie Howlett, they were back in the mountains, and they thought they had run across some signs of Ruth, and there was other people if you read the news stories and stuff. But these individuals were back in the mountains, and they just happened to be in the area of Needle Canyon and East Boulder Canyon. And that's where all their work and their searches and everything during that time period before that and afterward took place. So that's why they cleaned out of the area. Now this all fits in because if you ever look at the Adolph Ruth articles, you'll find that they circle Weaver's Needle, and the areas they kept searching and where they finally find the body are the areas that are in this perspective circle that this other group kept searching. So I suddenly realized, almost an aha moment, right? Close enough that I have a group that says they had a member that cited Adolph Ruth, but they wanted to keep their mouths shut because, one, their own research and their own searching, they had nothing to do with it. They just knew the guy was camped back in there, and if that's where he was camped and all this. Now, the funny thing is, there are several Dutch hunters today who have read those passages and know that, and they will sit there and they will try to correct me on it. Now, I'm sorry I didn't do the mischievous thing and try to make sure I got photographs of all that. I would hope those people don't destroy that material, because that would be horrible, because the material is there. I know the material is there, and I know where the material has been handed around, so I know it's in existence, and it completely changes the narrative a bit because of the personal nature of the families and where this material has come from. They don't necessarily want it out at this time. So I understand a lot of that, and that person never saw fit to publish that material in the public eye because they felt people would take it the wrong way. But I was like, I don't think it takes anything the wrong way. It's someone that saw them, and that individual's name is Glenn Ward. And Glenn Ward searched into the mountains for quite a few years and was back in there in Needle Canyon, Bluff Springs Mountain, around Weaver's Needle, in that general area. So Glenn Ward's diary, Glenn Ward talks about it, but another individual who partnered with Glenn Ward also references Glenn Ward's experience and then the group's decision to pull out of that area. So it's substantiating another man. It's in different penmanship, I would suppose, since I've never seen Glenn Ward's, but I heard about it from a very, very good source. So because I saw one that actually I can actually say identified is the actual journal by an individual from the 1930s, that he wrote and dated, and that it corresponds and substantiates the other individual's story. Did Glenn Ward see Adolph Ruth? I would think there was no reason for him not to, and especially from these guys suddenly disappearing out of the mountains for a year or two and making sure everything quieted down before they came back. Did they have anything to do with Adolph Ruth? No, I would seriously doubt it. If the names came up to public, people would not think they had anything to do with that or anything. There was nothing shady or sketchy. I think it was for good reputation. Plus, I think at the time, people thought they were trying to pin it on somebody. Now, there's going to be people that are going to just like shake their head and stuff, and they're going to say, well, Adolph Ruth was killed on Peter's Mesa, and they drug his body across and they put it up there and all. It makes a lot more sense that Adolph Ruth was camped somewhere in Boulder, East Boulder, and then he managed to get up on top of Blacktop, and it was way too much, and he was overwhelmed. He took enough water for a few hours, and that's what it took him, and then boom, he was done. And that's all there is to it. And they found his body up there later after the animals had scattered it. That simple story is so easy to just, it fits the narrative. It fits the medical examiner's report, fits almost everything with it. So there's nothing missing or any problem with it. But the problem is it's not great for like folklore storytelling, which is something that, most everyone, if you're writing a book, if you're doing even stuff like this, if you're sitting over there and you want to get people to watch, you're going to just stir it up. I make it, Adolph Ruth, and they brought him up on the mountain, and they took the gun, and they were demanding where it was, and then they finally pulled the trigger and blew the poor, elderly, crippled old man's brains out all over Blacktop and left his body to bleach in the sun. That's a hell of a lot better than he had a heart attack. So, but the truth is better because it explains, because more people die in the mountains from heart attacks, heat stroke, heart stroke, seizures, and that type of stuff than anything else. So most of the time it's accidental deaths by their own follies and their own, mistakes. So that would cut down on so many deaths, but instead those are perpetuated, and then we get those, and then they get further entwined with the actual murders and killings and homicides and whatever else take place in the mountain, because there's plenty of that too. I mean, there's plenty of that stuff to go around, so why do we have to embellish everything else? But I think at the time it was a big deal, and it got, hey, it was, I think that thing, Alice Cooper, homeboy from here locally, where I grew up, in the neighborhood I grew up, he always said there's no such thing as bad publicity. And maybe that's what they were thinking at the time. So I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something from it. Kind of think about it. We get to the rendezvous, we can talk. We can share that stuff and that a bit. I'm always going to be looking to kind of not out guys, but try to get that information eventually put in the hands of a place or position that eventually here over time it gets out, because I always believe it should be in the public domain to some degree, because it helps explain a lot of things and kind of changes the narratives. Just once someone gets something wrong, once someone puts something in print, everybody else is going to follow it in print. And I think that's what happens a lot of times, is one mistake's made, or for even a rhyme, reason, purpose, and then it continues on. And then 70, 80, 90 years later, you have no idea what the truth is. And I know what I saw. So I saw someone's actual journal in their handwriting, dated, talking about this stuff matter-of-factly, and there wasn't any reason to make it up. It was actually more of them worrying about, this could just screw everything up for us, because we didn't do anything wrong, but everybody's going to look at us because we're just not technically not local boys. And because of that, they might be everybody might give them an eye of suspicion. And a lot of times, a lot of guys Dutch hunting said they were going fishing to the wife, and then they went out Dutch hunting. So yeah, I'm camping and fishing with the boys for 3 days, and then suddenly you're in the newspapers because of that. Could also cause another problem. So I think there was a lot of things into that, and I think it's a really cool story. It's always, what I always say, it's that possibility, and I think it's more likely a probability when you use common sense to the matter and meaning of things. It kind of goes outside the normal storytelling vein. But hey, storytelling's great. There's nothing wrong with it, and the people that do it are masters of it. And if they do a great job and you're entertained, you walk away feeling good and stuff, and it makes you pick up a book, so be it. Because in the book you'll learn more, and then you maybe see the truthful side of it. And it doesn't mean the other man lied. It just means he got you in and put you on the path there to find the truth. Correct? We'll use that. That'll get everybody an escape clause. So that be it this week for Chasing Legends. Everybody come around through. Next time I see you, I hope you all had a happy Halloween and kind of went out and fed all the trick-or-treaters, because that's one of the coolest things. If you're one of those people that turns your light off and turns your TV up and tries to ignore all that, you know what? I got some choice words for you, because when you were a kid, you wanted to do it. Let the kids go out, let them have fun. There's nothing wrong with it. Let them get candy, let them have a happy time. Throw some red light bulbs, orange light bulbs, decorate a jack-o'-lantern, have a good time. It's just it's just one of those few holidays. There's nothing in it. Adults can have fun with it if they want, but it's mainly just for kids, and for kids to have a good time and get candy and stuff and run around in costumes and pretend they're Batman or Superman or Count Dracula or Frankenstein, or just a ghost if they have a sheet. I mean, almost every kid can do it. A kid with a pillowcase and a white sheet can run around the neighborhood like a ghost and get candy. It's awesome. So just kind of be supportive of all that, because that's one of my favorite holidays of all time. Thank you for watching Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. Have a good one. Take care.